Aloha, everyone. Welcome back to the negotiation table. My name is Wincy Hong, and I'm the communication specialist and your host today here at HGEA. So, with us today, we have former Governor John Waihee.
Aloha.
Aloha. And our HGA Executive Director, Randy Pereira.
Hey. Hi.
Mahalo, both of you, for making time for our discussion today. And before we dive in to this month's conversation, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well as like so you never miss an episode. Okay, so let's dive in. In 1994, 16,000 of our members from Units 3, 4, and 13 went on strike. It would become the first and only strike in HGEA's 90-year history. So now, nearly 30 years later, we have two guests who were present at the event joining us at the negotiation table. So, Governor served as the fourth governor of Hawaii from 1986 to 1994.
Right.
He is the first Native Hawaiian to be elected as governor and played pivotal roles in our state's constitutional convention in 1978, establishment of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and the Native Hawaiian Legal Corps, and the start of what is considered the Hawaiian Renaissance. So, a lot.
Wow.
We also had Executive Director Randy Pereira, who was a field services officer at the time. So let's reflect on the strike, the labor issues present at that time, and how the event shaped Hawaii's union landscape today. My first question is for you, Randy. Can you take us back to April 1994? Could you tell us a bit about what led up to the strike, and what were the issues on the table for the union, and what was the union's strategy at this time?
The primary issue of contention between us and the governor and the other employers, I should say, was the issue of funding for step movements. In prior contracts for Units 3, 4, and 13, we had negotiated step movement plans based on years of service. And that particular year, the governor and the employers offered us 2% a year, but refused at the time to fund the step movement. And as a result, our members were very upset, and it allowed us really to build up an emotion and a desire to make a stand. But at the same time, I think the governor would acknowledge that from some quarter or in some quarters, the strike for HGA was kind of about respect. Because if you go back at that time, you'll forgive, but some in the community used to call HGA the Panty Union. You remember us referring to that. But we had always made a lot of noise, but had never taken a stand. So I think that desire for respect was a huge factor in building up emotions and getting employees ready to the point where they said, hey, we're drawing a line in the sand about this, and we're going to strike.
And for governor, what was happening on the fifth floor at that time?
If you understand anything about politics, especially democratic politics, the campaigns are run really by women. In a real way, the success of the Democratic Party was really fostered by Unit 3. And I think there was a feeling of unappreciation, that Randy was talking about. So there was that layer in there that, look, we work hard for you guys, we build this Hawaii, we do all of these things, and, we don't get any respect. And Unit 3 was kind of interesting because, all of the units are sort of cousins, But Unit 3 had like a little closer cousin. Like Unit 13 really sort of followed Unit 3. And Unit 4 was, that was important to be with Unit 3, which was the largest unit. So I think there were a lot more at stake than just met the eye. What was good about it? Well, I know for me at the fifth floor, they're going to strike the pro-union governor, It was kind of fun, actually.
No, that's actually true, because back in 1984, right after I started, we reached a point with Governor Ariyoshi at the time where we were, all 6 unions, if you remember, were on the verge of striking.
Right.
And It was somewhat unprecedented, and the strike was averted literally at the last minute. Early in the morning, say 6 o'clock in the morning, I was already at our Kaneohe field office handing out signs. And the strike was averted. And in what I still considered to be a mistake by the unions, we sent everybody to work. And people were upset and frustrated because they couldn't vent. And all of the emotion that had built up was then wasted. And here, 10 years later, when you're facing a similar situation, that pent-up anger for those who had been working came to the fore. But at the same time, Gov is right. He's taught me, but I've known as well. On the mainland, in a lot of cases, unless you've declared war on your employer, you don't strike your enemy, you strike your friend.
Yeah.
Because one of the clear things that I will tell you that I learned and a lot of us learned with respect to the strike, you build up emotions, which is really a huge factor. Facts play in for sure, but it's emotion that drives people. We built up that energy and the emotion. We took the strike vote. We began the strike. And for those of us in this building, the immediate strategy has to shift. How are we going to solve it?
Yeah, how do you bring people back?
How are you going to bring
on?
people back? How do you get over that emotion and the expectations? And that's where it was beneficial for us to have someone like Governor Waihee, because he was intent on resolving the strike, while some of the other employers were not. And he could tell a cute story about that.
I tell you, it was interesting because, first of all, my cabinet all came, a lot of us came from the plantations. Just like Randy, we're Big Island plantation people. That's our background. So I remember the first meeting, we have a cabinet meeting right after the strike started. And the question then was, one of the union rules is which is the gate where people who are not striking can go to work and all of this kind of stuff, right? So we're standing around and we're getting briefed by the lawyers. And all of a sudden, one of my cabinet members, actually Harold Matsumoto, he raises his hand, and he says, "Hey, Gov, I just want to say one thing, He says, I never crossed the picket line in my life, and I'm not going to now. And the same thing, and Yuki Takimoto, these are all guys who grew up on the plantation, right? And they said, yeah, Ricky said, hey, Gov, me too, man. And I said, yeah. And then all of a sudden I realized I'm standing up, hey, I never crossed one either. So I immediately, this is why having friends is great, right? So I immediately called the then executive director, Russell, and I said, hey, Russell, I don't want to go through one of your picket lines. So at least Washington Place, can you leave one the back gate so that I can go home at night? It's that kind of thing. So we had that relationship where we actually worked with everything out, and I think there are more stories, but one of the important issues that maybe affected the future was that, to be really honest, the HTA was in those days, in any kind of strike mode, was actually at a disadvantage. Mm-hmm. The advantage belonged to the employer because the laws, it was written back then, had what they called essential workers. In a way, it was easy to say, okay, you're essential, you can go work, and that person would then be excused from the strike. And so that was a big issue in the beginning, who gets to go to work and who doesn't. Because other unions, you just close the whole place down. There's no such thing as essential worker. Why are you in strike? And so that was the background of what they had to deal with, the union had to deal with, was the fact that a lot of their workers were being excused from striking.
Like Governor here mentioned about essential workers. So news reports at the time tell of tax refunds that weren't being processed, along with a pause to licensing and permitting. What were some of the impacts that the state and county were dealing with when our people walked off the job? And do you think that the message sent about the people doing those vital services helped to build a case toward a successful resolution to the standoff?
Well, a lot of day-to-day services were cut off for sure. And a lot of things, particularly where it involved really hands-on clerical support, came to a grinding halt because our Unit 3 people were the first ones to go out on strike, and they struck for 2 weeks. The essential worker issue was a big challenge for us because the employers naturally attempted to declare more people to be essential for health and safety. And in effect, as the governor just suggested, that would limit the number of people that could be on strike. But a lot of things did come to a halt. I think the most glaring, and this is one that created the biggest dilemma for us, was when the Bureau of Conveyances employees went out on strike and it stopped all property transaction recordations in the state. And that costs developers money, it costs homeowners who are waiting. And we reached the point where some of our other members who weren't on strike were calling and begging because here they were waiting to buy the home of their dreams. And our people are standing outside the Kalani Moku building with a sign. So we made a decision, a pretty fateful decision that, to this day, I suppose can be debated. And one day, one of our staff took a group of bureau employees in. They knocked off all of the pending transactions, and we went back on strike. But we proved, I think, just with that our members do essential things. And they provide essential
Everybody
services.
is actually essential.
Right.
I mean, you can't. I mean, you know what is interesting? This is a little subtle story, but the Unit 3 people provide the assistance to the directors. See, so the last person you want to upset is the people in your office, right? And unfortunately, for the director, that was not necessarily in the category like the Bureau of Conveyances. I mean, you got to better learn how to write your own letters, maybe sign your name instead, that kind of thing. So there was always there was a kind of camaraderie in a way, at least with certain part of it. So, yeah, it was not a pleasant thing. On the other hand, Russell Okata, who is, the director at that time, and I had kind of came up through the ranks together. We literally came up through the ranks together. When I came out of law school, HGA was our client for the law firm I worked for. So Mr. Trask was here, David Trask was here, Russell was just a young guy running around like me, trying to figure out our way in life. And all of a sudden, we're in the strike together. So it was easy to, he would come over and we would talk. I said how close we are, and because not only you're dealing with the state, you're also dealing with the 4 counties.
Right.
And with all these issues. In fact, we got into trouble, if you want to hear a story, because one day I said, Russell came over and I said, I'm hungry, man. Let's go get something to eat. So we went to Vineyard Zippy's. And when we walk in there, a strike committee was sitting here, oh no, the enemies are together, and in that process. But this is Hawaii, and so it really was taken. So Russell told me something which you reminded me of. He said, if you're gonna strike a friend, don't strike an enemy, because I wanted to end the strike. Now there was a challenge. The counties, especially Hawaii County, the mayor there was Stephen Yamashiro, and if Stephen was a smart guy. He was a good lawyer, smart guy. He had worked at the labor board. So he knew the ins and outs of how to conduct a strike. And the first thing he did was he reminded people that the other mayors, that if they all stuck together, they kept themselves together, we couldn't ratify the contract from the employer's side. He was holding the mayors in a different kind of situation. But we finally worked out a deal, and we took it out, and the union ratified it. Now we have to see whether the employer would ratify. Part of that story was that the mayors called, said, we want to deal directly with the union, so we at least want to find out why you agreed to what you agreed to. And so they came down to Honolulu, and we sat in this, actually a lawyer's office. And I had my staff explain the contract, what we agreed to and all. We want to talk to Russell directly ourselves. So I called Russell up. I said, Russell, I want to talk to you, man. We want to see what we settled on, And he says, okay, I'll come over. I said, yeah, you come over, but you and I have a deal. So, we don't change deals after we shake hands. So he came over, he talked to them, and he said, no, this is what we agreed to. This is what I want. I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to give in on that. And this is, and he left, And then I told the mayors, I said, you guys can do what you like, but I'm going to send this to the legislature. Well, you can't do that. You don't have a fifth vote. I said, no, I'm going to send it to the legislature, and I'm going to send it to your consuls. And you go explain why you're not going to ratify the contract. I think one of the best things that came out of it was that maybe you change the way you end collective bargaining.
Mm-hmm.
The result of the strike was HGA gaining final and binding arbitration, which essentially means that strikes would no longer occur. What advantages does that give us in terms of bargaining power that differs from strikes, and how has binding arbitration worked out for us in practice over these last 30 years?
Well, certainly. Arbitration has provided an avenue to resolve the disputes without the disruption of a strike. But I can tell you that it's been the subject of debate for a lot of our members for many years. The purists continue to believe that striking would be the way. Yet, I would tell you, just in a half joking, but in a practical way, when we went on strike, for us on staff, it was a 7-day-a-week operation. And Monday through Friday, Unit 3 is on strike. I'm driving down Punch Bowl early Saturday morning and noticed that the parking lot at Kinauhale, the Department of Health, is packed with cars, and came to the realization that on the weekend our members went into work so that when the strike ended, they wouldn't have a mountain of work waiting for them. And we found that to be true because I checked other parking lots, and sure enough, people had gone into work. So it was almost self-defeating in a way, because it then limited some of the disruption, because some of the work was being processed very quietly on the weekend. But having said that, and making fun of that, arbitration has provided us a better way. We've been rather successful. I think much of our success is because really, I'll just say, not to patronize this gentleman, but Governor Waihee was probably the last governor that respected the union until the governor that we have today. We went through a series of governors that were unreasonable and would routinely suggest that employees were due no pay increase whatsoever. Made our job in arbitration a lot easier, because it's not right to just say people don't deserve some kind of increase. So we've been able to use the arbitration process to our advantage. But till today, I still have members that will get involved in a conversation with me about striking. And, as we've gone through a period of time in recent years where we've seen greater attempts by some of the employers to scale back employee rights, to once again disrespect and really not acknowledge the contribution that the employees make for their respective employer, the counties or the state. Every now and then I think about it, and because we proved back in '94 that a strike could be very effective and bring things to a halt. So it's still somewhere in my head every now and then.
It's the essential workers clause is actually something like being half pregnant.
Yeah.
And just to compare the difference, because especially with Unit 3 and Unit 13, a lot of the work is essential in the sense of just processing stuff. From the employer side, for me, it's kind of counterproductive to say one worker is essential and the person sitting next to him or her is not. I mean, everybody should be essential. They shouldn't be hired.
That issue caused a lot of dissension because employees were jealous of each other. A lot of the people who were determined to be essential actually wanted to be on strike and
the other way
around. And the other way around. There were people who were dying to be essential so they didn't have to suffer the wage loss. And in that respect, I think going to arbitration as the process helped because clearly, anytime you go on strike, there is a significant negative impact to you as an individual because you're not going to get paid. And the fact that you don't get paid for, at least in the case of Unit 3, that year, one full pay period, it mattered to these people because they don't make a whole lot of money to begin with. And it compounds over time. And it was very hard to get these employees to realize, and ultimately many of them did, that the action that they took would have long-term benefit, but they were going to suffer a short-term loss. The governor will tell you that for employers, they'll tell you, go ahead and strike, because at the end, when they settle, they're only going to give you the money that they didn't pay you for the previous 2 weeks.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what happened.
That's exactly what happened. And there are two situations like that where the whole traditional labor management complex is kind of skewed, in the sense that with government, the workers could be on strike, but the tax is still being collected. So all of a sudden, and this is why the counties were arguing about let's let the strike go on. Because at a certain point, we were making a lot of money because people were still paying us their taxes. But in government, you strike, government gets richer.
I do have a final question for you both. And I think you both touched on this a little bit, but what do you think is the lasting impact of the '94 strike, and how did it change the union landscape in Hawaii? So let's start with Randy and then Governor.
I believe, as I suggested at the start, that it created a different level of respect for HGEA in the community because it was unprecedented. It was a first for us. And even after years of rather blustery leadership from David Drass, we reached a point where we decided to flex and go out on strike. And the participation rate was very high and services came to a halt. And I think the local community came to realize that, in fact, these employees do perform necessary services. A lot of bluebirds were grumbling about the strike, of course, but I think in the broader sense, whether it be the business community or just local residents, came to realize just how important a lot of these government employees were. And on a going forward basis, it put us in a very different space, I think, in terms of our place in the community. That would be probably the most important thing that I can recall.
Yeah, and I think that I second that. I think that happened. I haven't seen, except from a distance, what evolved afterwards. But what I have seen is very positive, and that the other side of the strike was that despite all of the ups, downs, twists, turns, it did what Randy was describing, which is it did unify the union. Mm-hmm. And so it became a fist. And up until then, it might have been a little bit discrete units. Everybody sort of look out for themselves. But when you get into a strike, even the units that weren't striking were on the line. I mean, they were when they could, they were either walking or they were feeding people. Food, right? They were doing everything. So it had a unifying effect. One advice that I was given a long time ago is, which I think maybe modern employers should learn, and that is that the union is ultimately a democracy. which means that there's no one person that can say it's over. To a certain extent, there's only 5 people on the other side, ultimately. And so, you can decide something. So what am I trying to say? When you're the employer dealing with the union, you have to realize that whatever is settled upon needs to be ratified. So unless it is generally accepted, there's no tyrant that's going to say, sign this contract. So what the employer needs to do as part of their strategy is to facilitate that. To facilitate that happening. And that's what I think Russell meant when he said it's good to strike a friend. Because if you understand that, then you understand what his job was to get the majority of people agreeing to come back in after being going through a very traumatic situation.
I just want to mahalo both of you for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedules to share your stories with us. And we really appreciate all that you do. So thank you so much.
Thanks. It was fun.
Yeah.
Memories are fading. It was so long ago, but hey.
Someday.
Yeah. So folks, join the conversation in the comments. Let us know what you think about the strike. Where were you on the days of the strike? And for more content like this, don't forget to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. And we can't wait to see you all back here at the negotiation table next month. So for now,
Thank
we'll
you.
see you later.
Thank you.
Bye.